Starting off at number 10, we have Winona Ryder in the Rainbow Family Commune of Living. If you're a fan of all the iconic 80s movies and Johnny Depp's Wino Forever tattoo, then you should know the name Winona Ryder very, very well. But what you may not know is that Ryder was raised in the Rainbow Family Commune of Living for most of her life. Ryder's family joined the commune when she was just 7 years old and lived a life solely on the land. No TV, no electricity whatsoever. So how on earth did Winona become so excited about acting? Well, it was actually reading that got her interested in the profession, and when her family moved out of the commune a few years later, she began auditioning. Thankfully, they left the cult life behind before it went really south, but Winona still describes her parents as the 60s hippie type. When she started going to regular school, however, she was still considered an outcast and suffered various types of verbal and physical bullying. But there's a reason we know Winona's name, because she's awesome and she turned whatever weirdness people thought she had into a prolific film and TV career. Go Winona. Number 9. The Organite Society with Jaden Smith. This next one has drawn in the likes of Jaden Smith and Kylie Jenner. If you're a follower of these two celebs, then you may have seen them holding strange pyramid objects that look like the product of one of those satisfying TikTok resin videos. Well, that's not entirely wrong. These objects are called organites and are the signature object of those in the Organite Society. What are they? They are pyramids of organite, which is a man-made crystal said to be able to realign and heal our imbalanced energies. According to the official website, an organite is made from resin, metals, and quartz, which sounds like the perfect craft for all those TikTok resin hobbyists out there. The ideology behind the Organite Society stems from a banned Austrian psychiatrist named Dr. Wilhelm Reich. A student of Freud, he was expelled from the International Psychoanalytical Association after Freud found significant red flags in his practice and was like, nah, not this guy, get out. After escaping World War II Germany and coming to America, Reich brought his research with him. Unfortunately, I don't know. Making human-sized boxes out of organic and inorganic material. He claimed that if people laid on top of the boxes, the orgone would reorganize their cosmic energies, even allegedly healing those with cancer. He was eventually imprisoned for spreading medical disinformation and ironically died of heart failure. But even after his death, organites still live on and have obviously caught some significant attention. A part of me wonders whether Jaden and Kylie knew what they were joining, or if this was just something fun to make at parties. Coming in at number 8, we have David and Patricia Arquette. Though the entire Arquette family are actors, you may recognize the name David and Patricia Arquette for the shows like Medium and, I don't know, Scream. Alongside their interest in acting, the family also had a difficult upbringing linked to the Subud cult. Patricia was only 4 when they moved into the commune, and her brother David was in fact born there. But what is the Subud movement? Well, like many others, it's a cult built around a religious idea of finding the inner self and began in Indonesia in the 1920s. Centered around a practice called Latihan, members met around once or twice, men separated from women, to meditate and accept the power of God through movement. Wailing? Whatever they felt like. Basically sounds like they just did what they felt they needed to, or what they felt God told them to do. The Arquettes lived in a communal space with no washroom or electricity or running water in order to be brought closer to nature. The commune eventually became so poor that the government intervened and dropped off food for them. But apparently there was fun to be had at the commune, because very often the Arquettes would do performances. After a few years though, the family eventually moved back to Chicago after no longer being able to sustain themselves. We all know breathing is good for you. We need it. We literally can't survive without it. But some seem to think that's all we need to survive. Coming in at number 7, we have Michelle Pfeiffer and the Breatharian cult. A Breatharian believes that through strict meditation, they can reach a higher conscious state that allows them to be able to survive on air and sunlight alone. No food, nothing else. When Michelle was a young actress in Hollywood, she somehow got involved with a group of breatharians. I also love the name, it's so literal. Like, cut straight to the point, we're about breathing air. Breatharians. Apparently they were very controlling and kept her on a strict vegetarian diet that no one could sustain. Though she never lived with them, she visited constantly due to pressure she received. This became such a financial burden on her because she had to pay every time she was there, which was a lot. She was quite literally a starving artist. Her ex-husband Peter Horton helped her get out of it due to a movie he was working on at the time that dealt with followers of the Unification Church. After doing more research, Michelle finally realized that she was in a cult and got out. Thank goodness she did, because this cult also had some deadly consequences. Some people have even starved themselves to death by their own hand. Most famously was Verity Lynn, who while attempting a 21-day breatharian program died of hypothermia and malnutrition brought on by self-neglect. Coming in at number 6, we have Val Kilmer and the Christian Science group. Here is another cult that has its followers believing in the power of prayer to cure all. We may not have seen much of Val Kilmer lately unless you've been rewatching the 1995 Batman Forever or the Doors movie, but that's because we almost lost him. In 2014, Kilmer finally went to the doctor due to a massive lump in his throat and was diagnosed with throat cancer. Now, the Christian Science organization reneged this and said it was more of an idea of cancer rather than actual cancer. The group convinced him that he must instead relocate and dedicate himself to prayer so that his fear no longer manifested externally. Thankfully, his kids and family were like, "No, Dad, please, no, don't do that. That's not gonna work. That's not a thing," and thankfully convinced him to get the surgery he needed to survive. But even still, Kilmer attributes his healing to prayer and not, the doctors that helped him. Coming in at number 5, we have the surprising discovery of Glenn Close and the MRA. In 2014, the OG Cruella de Vil star revealed her family's experience with the moral rearmament cult. The MRA was founded by evangelist leader Reverend Frank Buckman in 1938 under the idea that to change the world you have to change the individual. Though that's not entirely a wrong way to look at global transformation, how he went about it was pretty, cultish? From age 7 to age 22, Glenn and her siblings were sent to live at the group headquarters in Switzerland. They indeed had a group mentality where everyone had to say and do all the same things. According to Close, if you even had desires to do otherwise, you were made to feel insanely guilty about it. When she finally broke away from the group, she wrote a furious letter to her father for what he had done by sending them to the group. She said as a result of her upbringing that she was terrified because she couldn't trust any of her own instincts, having entirely been defined by falsehoods while she was raised. Thankfully, she was able to find her way out of there, walk straight into acting school, therapy, and has now become the absolute icon she is today. Coming in at number 4, imagine your mom finally meets someone and you move in with him right away. Sounds like a suspicious setup? Am I right? This is an evil stepfather story. From age 7, famous rapper Angel Hayes was introduced to the Greater Apostolic Faith group by her mother. According to Hayes, all the people within the community lived 10 minutes apart and were forbidden to speak to anyone else outside of it. Couldn't listen to music, wear jewelry, and even eat certain things. It continued to get darker and darker, and sadly Hayes experienced some of the worst kinds of assault. Thankfully, Angel and her family escaped and she was out of there by age 10 and has built a phenomenal music career since then, which she has used to tell her story and reach out to those who need to hear the same. Her music is filled with passion and revenge for all those who wronged her inside this prolific cult. Her song, Cleaning Out My Closet, is the best example of how Angel has taken her story and used it to create badass music people need to hear. Coming in at number 3, before I continue to our top 3, please just reach down there, press that thumb, let us know you like us, and we'll be so grateful to you in return. Alright, coming in at number 3, we have Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan with the Children of God cult. Both McGowan and Phoenix belonged to the Children of God cult during a period of time in their upbringing. The cult was helmed by preacher David Brantberg in, you guessed it, the 60s, 1968 specifically, and it initially began as a group for teens. It was fairly standard, the communes were isolated, they believed the end was nigh, and all the rest of the things you need for a cult. No one had jobs because they didn't want to belong to the system. Soon the group had hundreds of different communes, but it was soon revealed that more sinister things were happening. The group was revealed to contain and circulate sex trafficking, even using girls referred to as flirty fishers to enlist recruits at bars. When Phoenix's mother was introduced to this idea, the family got the heck out of there, and so did McGowan's. McGowan says that she must have gotten out by the skin of her teeth, but remembers seeing the kind of slavery that many women were forced into. But what's even crazier, guys, is that the group is still around today, though they've changed their name. It is now called the Family International, and members are now allowed to live privately in their homes and work outside of the commune. With the allegations, they now believe that the apocalypse is actually not here yet, and they still have around 1,700 members today. Yeah, if you just got a sinking feeling in your stomach, I did too. Coming in at number 2, we have Scientology. This next one is pretty controversial, as many debate whether it is a new form of religion or a business or a cult or all three. If you guess Scientology, then you are correct, and I almost don't even need to tell you who are our stars involved with it. We got Tom Cruise, we got Elizabeth Moss, we got Christy Alley, and John Travolta, and actually many more. One of the reasons people think this religion is so far-fetched was that it was found by an American science fiction writer, Ron L. Hubbard, in 1958. 1955. It was initially introduced as a kind of therapy called Dianetics, which sought to erase the content of the active mind so the soul could be more free. But Hubbard came to detest it, as many psychologists denounced it. He was like, oh, never mind, I hate it. Whatever. Scientologists mainly focus on the evolution of the spirit on Earth and something called the Thetan, which they believe is an extraterrestrial creature who created all things. Thetans are trapped within us and have lived multiple human lives. The goal of the Scientologists is to become more aware of the Thetan within them so that they can achieve abilities they never thought possible. I think. I don't know. Guys, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, Scientology is pretty confusing, to say the least. But for some reason, this science and faith-based religion has swept Hollywood, and its followers are devout, to say the least. But those who have left often have some strange things to say. One ex-member named Leah Ramini says that any materials not written by a Scientologist are taught to be lies set on tearing the religion down. Anyone who speaks out against the church is considered an enemy, and they work to tear that person down. Another way the church makes it so hard to leave. Also, remember how I said some people think it's a business? Well, there is a case for that. Apparently there are tiers that define how ascended each follower is, and that there is a top tier that they can reach. Thing is, they have to pay, and Leia says that in fact that there's no top tier and it's all about keeping the money flowing in. Listen, I've read some kick science fiction in my day, and sometimes I want to believe it's so hard. Like, literally any Doctor Who episode I'm in. Sweep me off into your TARDIS, alien boy. But this, well, it's up to you to decide. And here we are, at last but not least, number 1. A cult that has recently been coding headlines with the face of one familiar Smallville actress, Allison Max. NXIVM hit headlines as a cult revolved around a man named Keith Raniere. Initially begun as a self-help multi-level marketing scheme for the heiress's CEOs, Hollywood actors, name anyone else who's famous, NXIVM has now been revealed as an abuse cult where its most devout followers would be branded and forced into sex slavery. Allison Mack was a fanatic within the cult and was even responsible for expanding and recruiting women for Raniere. In typical cult fashion, Keith was viewed as a god and savior, but when all the dirt got out, there was enough evidence to sentence him for 120 years in prison for all the abuse he dealt. The group was responsible for financial cons and ran for 20 years before information leaked about the cult. There is so much to unpack about this case, and no doubt you've heard about it. A lot of our top 10 have taken place in the 60s, which of course it was the hippie decade, you expect it, but even I can't sit still and watch an episode of Smallville without thinking about what was going on behind the scenes. Thankfully, the cult is no more, and many are being brought to justice. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Ordo Templi Orientis. The Ordo Templi Orientis is a controversial esoteric organization that was founded in the early 20th century by Karl Kellner and Theodor Reuss in Germany. Originally meant to be modeled after and associated with European Freemasonry, under the leadership of famous occultist Aleister Crowley, the group had a change in philosophy to be more aligned with Crowley's principles of Thelema. The cult is known for its secretive nature and controversial practices, including the use of ritualistic magic and sexual practices as a means of spiritual advancement. The organization has a hierarchical structure and emphasizes the importance of individualism and personal freedom. Of course, like with most cults, there are some controversial practices, but despite this controversy, the group has attracted a following among those interested in occultism and alternative spirituality. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Order of the Black Sun. The Order of the Black Sun is a secretive and controversial cult that has been the subject of much speculation and debate in recent years. Founded in the early 20th century, the group is believed to be based in Europe and has been linked to a number of bizarre and disturbing practices, including human sacrifice, occult rituals, and the worship of ancient deities. Members of the cult are said to be highly secretive and tightly knit, with their activities shrouded in mystery and hidden from public view. Many have claimed that the Order of the Black Sun is involved in a wide range of illegal and nefarious activities that include high-level crimes, as well as the manipulation of political and financial systems for their own gain. Many people claim that this group was founded by Heinrich Himmler and that its members included many high-ranking SS officers. People also have suggested that this cult attempted to use demon summoning as a way to help them win World War II. Even the demons were like,
No, absolutely not. Despite numerous investigations into the group, very little concrete information is known about the Order of the Black Sun, and many questions remain unanswered about their true motives and activities. However, what is certain is that this enigmatic cult continues to captivate and intrigue people around the world, with many eager to uncover the truth about this very shadowy organization. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club was a notorious secret society that existed in Britain during the 18th century. It was an extensive club that included some of the wealthiest and most influential people of the time, including politicians, aristocrats, and members of the royal family. The club was known for its very decadent parties, which were said to involve heavy drinking and gambling and all of the things people think these elite secretive parties hold. However, there were also rumors of more sinister activities, such as satanic rituals and human sacrifice. The Hellfire Club was shrouded in secrecy, and its members went to great lengths to keep their activities hidden from the public. However, their reputation as a group of debauched and immoral individuals eventually caught up with them, and they became the subject of scandalous rumors and gossip. Today, the legacy of the Hellfire Club lives on in pop culture, with many books, movies, TV shows featuring references to the group and their supposed activities. Despite these references, though, the true nature of the club's activities remain a mystery to this day. We're just left to speculate and come up with conspiracy theories. Drop your best one down below. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Order of the Nine Angels. This culty cult is a controversial and secretive organization that has been associated with the occult, Satanism, as well as having ties to some pretty controversial, hateful, and horrible beliefs. The group's origins are murky, but it is believed to have been founded in the United Kingdom in the 1970s. The ONA claims to be based on the principles of traditional Satanism and advocates for a return to pre-Christian pagan society. The teachings of the group are said to be highly esoteric and involve a very complex system of rituals, beliefs, and practices, which sounds really cool and mysterious until you hear that the group has been accused of promoting violence, extremism, and hate. Many people have accused the group of practicing black magic, as well as using the practice of summoning demons, and apparently this group has even been able to be linked to horrifying crimes, which include killings. Because of the nature of the controversy surrounding this group, its teachings have been banned in several countries, but despite these bans, the group continues to operate in secret, with its members communicating online and in private meetings. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was a mystical and magical organization that emerged in the late 19th century in England. It was founded by 3 prominent figures: William Wynne Westcott, Samuel Liddell McGregor Mathers, and William Robert Woodman. All 3 of these guys were fascinated by the esoteric teachings of ancient civilizations and sought to create a system that combined spiritual and mystical practices. The order drew upon various mystical and occult traditions, including Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, and tarot, in order to create a comprehensive system of magical practices. Its teaching emphasized personal development, spiritual evolution, and the attainment of spiritual knowledge and enlightenment. The order's rituals and teachings were highly secretive and were only accessible to members who had undergone a rigorous initiation process. Its members included prominent figures such as Aleister Crowley, of course, W.B. Yeats, and Arthur Edward Waite, who went on to make significant contributions to the fields of mysticism and occultism. Despite the relatively short existence of this group, the order has had a profound impact on modern Western esotericism and continues to inspire spiritual seekers and magicians to this day. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Kabiri Mysteries. The Kabiri Mysteries refer to a set of ancient Greek religious practices and rituals associated with the Kabiri deities, a group of enigmatic gods worshipped in various regions of Greece, particularly on the island of Samothrace. The mysteries involved secretive initiation ceremonies that were performed exclusively by the initiated members of the cult and were believed to impart special knowledge and spiritual power to the participants. It's one of the most secretive religious groups in history, and the exact nature of the group remains the subject of intense debate among scholars because there is so little information to go on. It is generally believed that the cult was closely connected to the cults of Demeter and Persephone, and that the initiation rites involved elements of mysticism, fertility rites, and underworld symbolism. This mystery group exerted a significant influence on the development of Greek religion and culture, and were celebrated by various communities throughout the Hellenic Hellenistic world. Despite the mystery that shrouds them, the Kabiri Mysteries continues to fascinate scholars and enthusiasts alike, offering a tantalizing glimpse into the ancient religious practices of Greece. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Church of Satan. The Church of Satan is a religious organization founded in 1966 by Anton LaVey. Despite its name, the Church of Satan does not worship Satan as a deity, but rather advocates for individualism, self-indulgence, and rational thinking. LaVey created the Church of Satan as a reaction to what he saw as the hypocrisy of mainstream religion and the repressive nature of society at the time. The Church of Satan's philosophy is centered around the concept that Satan is a symbol of rebellion and individual freedom. Members believe in indulging in their desires and pursuing their own happiness as long as it doesn't harm others. The church also promotes the idea of magic as a tool for self-improvement and self-realization. Heard that's where the demon summoning comes in. Demons aren't all bad, some can be helpful, you just need to know what you're doing. Of course, with a name like the Church of Satan, you're gonna face some controversy, and this group certainly has received its fair share of criticism over the years, with many accusing it of promoting evil and immorality. The organization maintains that it is a legitimate religion with a unique philosophy and worldview. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Temple of Set. The Temple of Set is a religious organization that was founded in 1975 by Michael Aquino, a former member of the Church of Satan. Wow, what a crazy connection. The Temple of Set is based on the philosophy of Setianism, and the group mainly focuses on the worship of Set, an ancient Egyptian deity associated with chaos, strength, and individuality. The Temple of Set is unique among religious organizations in that it places a strong emphasis on individualism and self-realization. It also incorporates elements of ancient Egyptian religion, as well as ideas from other Western esoteric traditions. Members of the Temple of Set are encouraged to pursue knowledge and self-discovery through practices such as meditation, ritual magic, and intellectual inquiry. The organization is very secretive and very exclusive, with membership only available through invitation. While believing in and worshipping the deity, those who belong to this group also believe in the existence of demons and other supernatural entities. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Manson family, started by the horrible Charles Manson. This story starts off when Manson was released from prison in 1967, where he then moved to San Francisco, where he gained a small following that would eventually go on to be the cult known as the Family. This charismatic yet very unstable ex-convict attracted a group of young and vulnerable followers who believed he was a messianic figure with profound insights into society and the future of humanity. And not only this, but they also believed that he had supernatural powers as well. The group eventually moved to an abandoned ranch outside of Los Angeles, and it was here that Manson continued to brainwash his followers and manipulate them with his own religious philosophies. Manson's followers carried out these brutal killings under his instructions, which he claimed were a part of a twisted plan to incite a race war he called Helter Skelter. In the end, Manson and several of his followers were eventually arrested and charged for the crimes, with a trial that was highly publicized. Manson's bizarre behavior and manipulative tactics in court further solidified his reputation as a deranged cult leader, and the story of this cult has had a lasting impact on American culture and continues to fascinate and absolutely horrify people to this day. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar, also known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, was a medieval Christian military order that was founded in the 12th century to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land during the Crusades. The order became known for their bravery and skill in battle, and they quickly gained wealth and power throughout Europe. The Knights Templar became one of the most influential and respected organizations of their time, with members including knights, monks, and priests who took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They were known for their distinctive white mantles with a red cross and their motto, "Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory." However, their power and wealth eventually became a threat to some European monarchs and the church, which many claim led to their downfall. The Knights Templar were disbanded in the early 14th century, especially since they were being accused of heresy and devil worship by the Catholic Church.
In our number 10 spot, we have Angel's Landing. In the early 2000s, there was a cult by the name of Angel's Landing, which was also the name of the site the cult would meet in Wichita, Kansas. Lou Castro, also known as Daniel Perez, was the leader of this cult, and his followers were convinced that he was an angel. He had also convinced his followers that he was a seer, aka a fortune teller or a psychic, and he would perform ceremonies where he would predict their future and know when they were going to die. Of course, it's because he himself was going to kill them, but before doing so, he took out life insurance policies on them and then cashed in that money for luxury vehicles and items. Wow. The death prediction would have been a red flag to me, but clearly these people were in a very vulnerable state to believe that. Thankfully, Lou was found guilty for 28 crimes and has been sentenced to life in prison. Hallelujah. In our number 9 spot, we have the Great White Brotherhood. This is a known Australian cult that was founded by Anne Hamilton Byrne. In the 1960s, Anne was a yoga teacher who actually believed herself to be Jesus Christ. She teamed up with parapsychologist Raynor Johnson to form the cult, and over a few years, Anne adopted 28 young ones by receiving them as gifts from members, as well as by falsifying papers to convince others to give their children up for adoption. The goal? To create a master race that would survive the apocalypse that was believed to be coming. She would tell these humans that she was Jesus Christ, and if they went against any of her wishes, they would be beaten, starved, or dosed with an illicit drug. The cult was eventually raided and everyone was removed, and Anne was charged. But get this, she was only charged for falsifying birth certificates. That's it. She died actually from dementia in 2019 at 98, but never received any further punishment. Wow. In our number 8 spot, we have the Children of God. Also known as Teens for Christ, it was founded in 1968 by preacher David Berg in California. It attracted the hippies of the day, as this cult preached the words of Jesus and the Bible, but with more of an open twist to the free love movement of the time. There were horrible ritual acts, such as the one that was called flirty fishing, where women would perform acts of giving themselves in different inappropriate ways to get men into the cult. Mainly everyone in the cult didn't work, and there were about 15,000 members around the world. Allegedly, actors Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan grew up in Children of God communes. Pretty wild. In our number 7 spot, we have the NXIVM cult. This is a cult that was run by a guy by the name of Keith Raniere, and he started this cult in 1998. It was alive for 20 years till 2018 when he was sentenced to life in prison. Positioned as a health and wellness organization, within the organization was a dark cult where women were recruited and called slaves, and they would refer to Keith as their master. Anyways, when they were being initiated into the cult, a ritual was performed where Keith would brand these women with his initials in their pelvic area. Each woman was instructed to say, "Master, please brand me, it would be an honor." Well, that's horrifying. In our number 6 spot, we have Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate is a cult that was started by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles in the 70s. This is a cult that believes in aliens, spaceships, and a recycling of the earth that is coming upon us soon. I say believes as in present tense because apparently there are still people alive that follow it. In fact, the original website still exists. When Nettles passed away, apparently Applewhite took the group to a whole new extreme when he persuaded 38 members to take their lives by poisoning themselves. Apparently the bodies were found all wearing the same clothes with Nike shoes, and all of them had $5.75 in their pockets. I wonder what that represented. Anyways, I can't believe that people still follow this. Hopefully videos like this and documentaries about this cult will shed light on the fact that this group should be avoided and not believed. In our number 5 spot, we have Church of the Lamb of God. This cult was started by Ervil Lebaron in Chihuahua, Mexico. He was another one who convinced his followers that he received messages from God. He would perform a ritual where he would use an abandoned Mormon doctrine that's called blood atonement, and this allowed the killing of sinners to cleanse them of evil. His followers also killed on his behalf under the teachings of this doctrine. The media called this cult's leader the Mormon Manson reason, due to the similarities and power he had over his followers, that is seemingly comparable to Charles Manson. In our number 4 spot, we have the Manson cult. Charles Manson is probably one of the most famous cult leaders of the last 100 years. Manson started his group in 1967 in San Francisco and then moved to Los Angeles. His followers wouldn't hold your typical religious rituals because they definitely preached the 60s free love lifestyle, but they did kill on behalf of Manson. Some say in an attempt to create copycat killings to get their friend out of jail, and some say these killings were actually due to the fact that Manson wanted to be a musician, and it is believed that Sharon Tate's house belonged to a music producer that wouldn't give him a record deal. Whatever the case, he and his cult will probably stand as one of the most known cults in the world. In our number 3 spot, we have People's Temple. The People's Temple is a cult from the 1950s in Indiana and founded by Jim Jones. It eventually moved to Redwood, California. The church was known for promoting socialism, equality, and then for having elements of Christianity. Sounds like it was maybe not that bad, but just you wait. They of course had many rituals, and one of its darker rituals were during Mass, Jim would plant people in the audience for him to perform fake healings on, and he would pull chicken livers out of their mouths. And this would recruit a lot of people, of course, as he was thought to be magical, you know? Makes sense. Okay, I really wonder, were these, plants just sitting in the audience with chicken livers in their mouths? What the heck? How did they say yes to this? I might vom just thinking of it. Also, once these people were a part of this cult, did they not realize that he had been faking the healings and then, couldn't they have just left? The last and final ritual for so many, Jim Jones ordered his followers to drink a cyanide-laced beverage, and that led to the death of 918 people. This is where the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid came from. In our number 2 spot, we have the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Church. This is a church that honestly screams the unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Anyone? Such a good show. I bet the writers of the show got their inspiration from this cult. So this church cult was run by a man named Warren Jeffs, and he had a number of wives within the church. It was a polygamous Mormon church. Rituals would include your regular church worship with the twist of do what I say and give yourself to me or you will be damned to hell. Women weren't allowed to cut their hair and were made to wear prairie dresses, and also Warren decides who marries who. And of course, he marries most of the women. Warren Jeffs was eventually sentenced to jail for a number of accounts, but apparently some still believe him to be a prophet. Coming up in our number 1 spot, we have whatever cult Angelina Jolie once spoke about. Okay, so there is a Hollywood cult that Angelina Jolie was once caught on camera speaking about to her friends in 1999. The video surfaced online in 2006. The name of the cult was never mentioned, but the details of one of the rituals that is performed is pretty terrifying. We can imagine that it's some Hollywood cult, I'm sure there's a bunch, as she mentions that it's a sort of celeb initiation that is often misunderstood as a form of sadism and masochism combined. Apparently, Angelina talks about her experience and how during the ritual, the initiated people are tied up and tortured, and acts of inappropriate touching are performed, if you catch my drift. She then talks about how she got a tattoo after the ritual and how she had to kill a snake as a sacrifice. Anyways, I wish I knew what cult this was, but I have no idea, so we're going to continue to call it the cult that Angelina Jolie once spoke about.
Starting off this list, we have the Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. This cult with the catchiest name was founded in Uganda by 4 ex-Roman Catholic priests, 2 ex-nuns, and 1 former sex worker, and it was initially said to really emphasize the 10 Commandments. Apparently these leaders thought that the Roman Catholic Church had really abandoned the 10 Commandments, and they wanted to bring back some rules. They couldn't just focus on these rules, however, they also had some doomsday prophecies as well, like all good cults. They claimed that the apocalypse would come on December 31st, 1999, and in anticipation of this, a bunch of the members sold all of their possessions, so of course they were pretty irritated when the world in fact did not end. The leaders scrambled and instead altered their prediction, saying that the Virgin Mary would instead come on March 17th, 2000, and that she would bring them all to heaven. The followers continued to believe this, and on March 16th they had a huge feast. The following day, on March 17th, police arrived to where the cult resided and found that an explosion and fire had killed hundreds of members of the group. At first they thought that this could have been a voluntary event, but soon they saw the signs that pointed to this being a mass killing. The leaders likely took the lives of the followers because they could not pay them back, and they also knew that their quote-unquote prophecies were false. At first it was thought that the leaders were among those whose bodies were found, but that isn't quite the case. No one is exactly sure if they ended up losing their lives or if instead they fled the country, which many people believe. At this point there is still a warrant out for their arrest, so while the authorities have never officially confirmed that they are on the run, it is truly the most likely scenario. In our number 9 spot today we have Karen Zerbe. Karen is the leader of the cult now known as the Family of Love, which is much better known by its former name, the Children of God. In 1969, Karen joined a group called Teens for Christ and ended up becoming the personal secretary to David Berg, who was the one who founded the group. Eventually, David would divorce his wife in order to marry Karen. Karen had a son named Ricky, and his childhood was made into a book which was used to show other members of the cult how they should raise their children, but the book included some pretty horrific and disturbing content. At first, Karen wasn't around or extremely active in the cult, but she began to insert herself more and more and began making rules and enforcing discipline. Once David began to get sick in 1988, Karen took over the leadership position that she had been groomed for. After David passed away, she married another leader from the cult, and all the while Karen was extremely elusive. So much so that some of her followers didn't even know what she looked like. This cult has actually seen a few celebrities over the years. Jeremy Spencer, who was one of the founding members of Fleetwood Mac, is a member of this cult. Joaquin Phoenix and his siblings were unfortunately subject to this terrible cult when they were growing up, but they all chose to leave later in life and as adults have spoken out about the cult. Unfortunately, Karen is still active as the cult's leader, even though she most definitely should be in prison, and she still remains in hiding, living off of what money she could collect from her followers. In our number 8 spot today we have Warren Jeffs. Warren Jeffs is the president of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints, and is also serving a life plus 20-year sentence, which is exactly where he should be, but before being caught, he lived his life in hiding from the authorities, trying to flee the persecution he had to know was coming. His father was once the president of the cult, but when he passed away, the position was passed on to Warren. As new leader of the polygamous cult, he said that no one should even attempt to marry one of his father's widows, but just a few days later he himself married all of them except for 2 because one refused and then was banned from ever marrying again, and the other ran away. If your marriage proposal causes someone to flee the cult that they're in, you clearly aren't a very good person. Warren had the power to assign who would marry who, but he was also able to punish a man by taking his wives and children and assigning them to another man. As a man, you had to have at least 3 wives in order to get into heaven, but the more wives, the more likely it would be that you got into heaven. In 2005, the Texas authorities conducted a raid and took legal custody of 416 children after someone called in and tipped them off about all of the horrible things that were happening at the ranch. In 2006, Warren was arrested and is still serving his sentence. There is so much more to this case that we don't have the time to cover, but there was a documentary released this year called Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, which I would fully recommend if you want to know more about this horrible person. In our number 7 spot today we have Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo. Adolfo was at one point a dealer and also the leader of a horrifying cult that was nicknamed by the media the Narco-Satanists. Adolfo's followers believed that he had magical abilities, but in the worst way possible. He required his followers to kidnap young men who Adolfo would practice horrible, sadistic rituals on and ultimately take their lives in order to replenish his magic. It's an absolutely horrific story, and this carried on for years until the disappearance of Mark Kilroy. Mark was a Texas college student who was in Mexico for some fun over spring break in 1989, but sadly during this trip he was taken by the cult's followers. Mark's friends quickly noticed his disappearance and began searching for him. This led to a border-crossing manhunt, and authorities quickly revealed what had been going on, but Adolfo had already fled. He and 4 of his followers fled to Mexico City, and this is how he was finally caught. Police were called to the apartment they were staying at as a result of a totally unrelated dispute, but because Adolfo knew they were looking for him, he just assumed that they were there for him, and he opened fire with a machine gun. Not wanting to go to prison, he then handed the weapon over to one of his followers and asked him to open fire on himself, and by the time police were able to reach the apartment, he was already dead. In the end, 14 cult members were charged for the crimes relating to everything that went on. In our number 6 spot today, we have Shoko Asahara, leader of the Aum Shinrikyo cult and claiming to be the reincarnation of the Hindu god Shiva. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. He said he was destined to lead his followers to salvation once the apocalypse came, but then once he lured in followers, he claimed he could also teach them to levitate and develop telepathic abilities. Apparently those who were most skeptical, he allowed them to drink his bathwater. I have no idea why or what this was supposed to be for, and I wish I could unlearn it, to be honest, but now we all have to suffer with that information together. The cult continued to grow, and it drew in influential and wealthy people. And what did Shoko do? He devised a plan and had a group go on to attack Tokyo in 1994, which took the lives of 7 people. Then in 1995 they released gas into the Tokyo underground, which led to 12 deaths, 50 injured people, and more than 5,000 people with temporary vision problems. Of course, this sent him into hiding as he didn't want to face the consequences of his actions. After several months, however, he was found hiding out in the group's compound near Mount Fuji. In the end, Asahara and 11 of his disciples ended up being arrested and charged, and they were all sentenced to death in 2004. In our number 5 spot today, we have David Koresh. You may also know him as Vernon Howell, but whatever you call him, he sucks. In the 1930s, Lois and Ben Rodin, who were the founders of the Branch Davidian sect, believed that a new messiah would arrive. Shortly after this is when David joined the group and he began to get close to the pair. After Lois passed away, he managed to gain control of the following, and he changed his name to become the new leader and self-proclaimed messiah. Under the control of David, allegations of horrible crimes began to come out from the cult, and on February 28, 1993, there was a warrant issued for his arrest, but David wasn't about to give up that easily. David hid himself inside of a compound, and when the authorities came knocking, things escalated and there was a shootout in which 6 members of the group lost their lives, but so did 4 members of the ATF. Over 51 days there were negotiations being made with David while he continued to stall. It is said that this all finally came to an end when the FBI carried out a last mission to take members of the sect by force. This is when the compound they were in was set on fire and 76 members of the Davidians, including David himself, perished. In our number 4 spot today, we have Jim Jones. Jim is certainly one of the most well-known people on this list for all of the wrong reasons. He is the man who claimed that he was the reincarnation of Jesus, Buddha, and Gandhi, and he founded the cult which was originally called Wings of Deliverance, but he later changed the name to the People's Temple Full Gospel Church. After an expose in the New West magazine about the things going on in this cult, Jim felt the need to move him and his followers into hiding. In order to flee the media scrutiny in the United States, Jim leased land in Guyana and ended up moving them all there. From here, there were claims of horrible things and human rights violations, which led to another investigation. People found out that some of the supposed members of this cult were actually being held against their will. In the end, with all of this going on, Jim managed to convince his followers to all take their lives in one massive, horrible event, and this day has gone on to become known as the Jonestown Massacre. A total of 918 people died that day, including Jim himself. In our number 3 spot today, we have the True Russian Orthodox Church, also known as Heavenly Jerusalem. This cult was an offshoot of the Russian Orthodox Church founded by Peter Kuznetsov. Back in 2007, there were about 30 members of this group that all went into hiding in a Russian cave, where Peter told them that they had to wait until the world ended in 2008. This one is a little different from the others on this list because while Peter put these members into the cave, he didn't go in there with them. After 2 members died in the cave, one passed from cancer and the other from starvation, some of the members ended up deciding to leave. Like, thank goodness. They ended up leaving because they were frightened of the toxic fumes that could come from the corpses. The other members in the cave only left after the roof of the cave started to collapse in 2008. In May of that year, after the bodies of those who had passed were removed by authorities, the cave was then blown up. In our number 2 spot today we have Daniel Perez. Daniel Perez might be better known by his alias Lou Castro, but whatever you want to call him, he led a cult that was located on a 20-acre property in a rural area just north of Wichita. He convinced his followers that he had magical powers, and he told them all that he was a centuries-old angel who needed to commit some horrific crimes in order to stay alive. These crimes would have certainly been more than enough to just throw him on this list, but he of course couldn't just stop at committing one type of crime. He had to make sure he really stole the show on being the worst. Basically, he had this clever idea to use his followers' life insurance policies in order to live a lavish lifestyle. Like, as if no one would think that's weird or suspicious. While some of these life insurance policies were collected through regular means, of course that kind of greed only leads to evil things, which of course means that he ended up taking one of his followers' lives so that he could collect the cash. It is thought that he also contributed to the deaths of some of the other people's life insurance policies he cashed in on, but unfortunately there was never any evidence that would be able to substantiate that claim. In 2010, Castro moved from Kansas to Tennessee and adopted a new identity, but he was soon arrested by the FBI for aggravated identity theft and fraudulent use of a social security card number. While serving time for this crime, it was discovered what his real name was, as well as the charges that had been placed against that former identity. Thankfully, in February of 2015, he was convicted on all counts and received a sentence of 80 years in jail. In our number 1 spot today, we have Benito Massaro. At 25 years old, Benito decided to move his life to America, where he began to post his teachings online, but recently, former members of his cult have begun speaking out about the harm that they faced as a part of it. It is said that many of his beliefs follow the sort of ideas of igniting a quote global awakening, and that he plans to quote establish an enlightened civilization ready for interstellar absorption by 2035. But aside from these lofty goals and ideologies, the leader has come under his fair share of scrutiny, and for good reason. His first time in the hot seat was back in 2017 after somebody took their own life at one of his 12-day Sedona retreats. This story quickly picked up the attention of the media, where critics began referring to him as quote Steve Jobs meets Jim Jones. Apparently, as a result of this criticism, he ended up moving from the United States back to Holland. This is where he continued to hold retreats, but because of the intense scrutiny, he has vanished quite a bit from holding these in-person events, instead moving a lot of his content over to, you guessed it, right here on YouTube. And he is not shy in showing off the money he has been given by his followers. One of Benito's former followers, Jade Electra, has taken to her Instagram to warn others of the danger of his cult and teachings. She wrote, quote, "He is a walking dementor, and I am standing up and sharing the truth because too many are abused and stuck behind the fear, the bullying that occurs in the cults, and their literal gag orders students are given before they even know what will happen to them." Another former member who also spoke out, Keelan McNeil, wrote, quote, "Over the course of the years, it became increasingly and eventually blaringly obvious that Benito Massaro's intention is to not actually help the planet or others, but it is to use his, quote, mission or organization to get what he wants, which is only women, money, and power." She continued on, quote, "I want you all to know that the psychological and spiritual warfare that takes place behind closed doors and within Benito Massaro's community is extremely dark and dangerous. People are giving up their free will under the guise of transcending their egos, and Benito Massaro is exploiting them in every way that he can as a result."
In our number 10 spot, we have the Ant Hill Kids. In 1977, a Canadian man named Rock Theranault, I might be pronouncing it wrong, it's kind of a hard name to pronounce, created a doomsday cult that was called the Ant Hill Kids. Their beliefs were based on the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a church that Therault was personally removed from before creating his own cult. He began to assemble his followers on the premise that the world would end in February of 1979. The cult resided in Burnt River, Ontario. Rock is most known for performing all kinds of surgeries on his followers, including amputations and castrations. Oh my lord. He even fathered 26 people with multiple wives within this cult. Ruck was thankfully arrested in 1989, and he met his own doomsday end in prison by another inmate in 2011. In our number 9 spot, we have The Family, a popular Australian cult that was founded by a woman named Anne Hamilton Byrne in Victoria in the 60s. Anne convinced mothers to give up their children, and Anne adopted all 28 of them. They were dressed in traditional gender-specific plain clothing and were continuously mentally and emotionally hurt by Anne. At some point within these years, Anne started taking an illicit drug and began to think of herself as Jesus Christ. She would tell her family to take this psychedelic during her sermons, and she would preach that they were the master race that would continue on when the world ended. Anne was eventually caught by the police, but only was charged with a small fee, and then she went about her days, just living life until 2019 when she passed away. Well, at least that now means that her doomsday cult will be forever put to bed. We hope. In our number 8 spot, we have The Brethren. Still around today, and possibly a cult that would love to be adopted worldwide, I'm sure. This is a cult that was founded by Jimmy T. Richards in 1971. This group is considered radical as they believe that the only way to prepare for the end of the world is to purify yourself by giving up all modern conveniences and conflicts. The members are forbidden from celebrating. Man, that sucks and hurts my soul. I feel like I celebrate all the time. Heck, I celebrated when I woke up earlier and pushed myself to stay up. That's cause for celebration. They are expected to make anything they need and ignore all modern social conventions. Imagine having to make everything you need in life. No, I can't imagine this. I don't even know how to use a hammer properly, so I would probably be kicked out of this one. In our number 7 spot, we have the Plymouth Brethren. This is a doomsday cult that was created in 1831 in Dublin, Ireland, that was created by John Darby, a clergyman. Eventually, the group made its way to the United States, where it had roughly 50,000 followers. They studied the Bible, but the cult had some very interesting rules and beliefs as well. Members weren't allowed to go to the theater, probably because of fear of indoctrination of non-Bible believing ideas. But also, for example, all pets needed to be put down as they were considered a distraction to God. Even the members had to attend service 5 times on Sundays. So basically, they had no Sunday. The cult is most likely still strong today because John Darby never actually put an end date down for the doomsday. He just said it would happen at the end of the church age. Smart. Then you could die before it happens, and you'll never know if you were right, and you also never have to take the blame if it doesn't because you never said when. In our number 6 spot, we have the Laodicean Remnant Adventist Church. This cult is truly very terrifying, so I'm so happy that it has been raided and closed down. I mean, all cults are terrifying, but most of these cults are joined by people that have the choice to be a part of them. This cult gained its following through force. 79 people were put into forced labor, and they were promised that they would achieve salvation before the world ended. They were forced to sleep in tents and use dangerous machinery, and they were also forced to sleep near containers of dangerous chemicals. You would think that perhaps their food would be covered by this cult, but it was not. The brainwashing ended up running so deep that the people didn't even want to leave when the cult was raided in 2019. I'm so glad that this cult will not be trying to take over the world anytime soon. Coming up in our number 5 spot, we have Heaven's Gate. Not a cult that necessarily wanted to take over the world in its prime, but one where the leaders definitely thought that they were special enough that a Bible verse was referring to them. Arguably not as threatening, however, they managed to convince a group of people to take their own lives, so perhaps they truly were. Marshall Applewhite and wife Bonnie Nettles apparently read the book of Revelation and saw a reference in chapter 11 verse 3 to 2 witnesses to the end times, and they believed themselves to be those 2 witnesses. They at one point believed that a UFO would transfer them to a higher state of being, and when that didn't happen, they moved on and began believing that if they took their own life, then their souls would be transferred to a spaceship following the Hale-Bopp comet. What's eerie to me about this cult is that someone has kept their initial website active for all of these years. The creators have long gone, so why? Perhaps someone somewhere still believes in these ideas and hopes others will too. In our number 4 spot, we have the Children of God. A man by the name of David Berg created the Children of God cult, and it was founded in 1968 in California. The cult preached the word of God, but with a slight twist, such as it encouraged its girls to go flirty fishing, where essentially women would recruit men into the cult by performing acts of giving themselves in inappropriate ways. There were about 15 members in this cult around the world in its prime, believe it or not. The cult is actually still active today under the name Family International, so yes, perhaps it is a cult that one day hopes to take over the world. Hopefully at this point they've dropped the flirty fishing. In our number 3 spot, we have Shincheonji. This is an active cult still today that was founded in 1984 by Lee Man-hee. Known as the Shincheonji Church of Jesus, this cult is devoted to the thought that only through Lin Man-hee is Jesus Christ reanimated. Through him, followers believe that they can escape damnation. This is one of the largest doomsday cults in South Korea, and so many say is heavily radicalized. For example, they preach that getting sick is a sin as it distracts the person from being able to preach the word of God. In 2020, a practicing woman took her own life when she got sick with the coronavirus. This cult continues to try to spread its word to the world, and they definitely would want to take over if the opportunity presented itself. In our number 2 spot, we have the Church of Almighty God, aka Eastern Lighting. This is a pretty serious doomsday cult that is said to be still active today. I was honestly quite terrified while reading some of the reports that have been filed on this cult that I can't even believe it hasn't been shut down yet. This is a cult that was based off of a woman claiming that she was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. She is pretty obscure and most members have no idea who she is. Limited people have contact with her. The group is known for its violent acts against people of all ages. On October 14th, 2014, a woman was heavily beaten to death after turning down the cult members who were trying to recruit her. Honestly, this sounds more like a mob to me, but would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. In our number 1 spot, we have the Supreme Truth. Supreme Truth is a cult that started in Japan in the 80s that was strong for 2 reasons. 1, people believed that its creator, Shoko Ashara, was not only the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, but also of Buddha. We'll get back to that one. And 2, because he had his followers believe that after World War III ended, humanity would come to an end. A thought that began to slowly become less convincing as World War III never came about, and humanity wasn't seemingly coming to an end. But the fact that people not only thought he was the reincarnation of Jesus and Buddha has to make you think, what the heck were they drinking? That is so clearly not a true story. Nonetheless, people believed him so heavily that they even paid money for his bath water, his hair, and one person even wanted his blood. Eventually, this cult turned quite violent, committing a lot of crimes in Japan, and after being captured, changed its name a few times. Rumor has it that it's still active and gaining traction. Yikes. Well, that's terrifying. I think I may go into my Disney princess bubble for the rest of the day, as the idea of these cults still in power and trying to influence the people of the world is just the most scary. Excuse me as I go blast the Tarzan soundtrack. Phil Collins always soothes the soul.
Starting off this countdown, we have Heaven's Gate. Found in 1974 and led by Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite, the Heaven's Gate cult believed in UFOs and impending doom. They convinced their followers that the only way they could escape this was by taking their own lives. By doing this, they believed that they would reach the next level and help evolution on other planets. And according to them, Jesus was an extraterrestrial, and when he died, his body rose from the dead before being carried away by a spaceship. Interesting, I know. In 1997, 39 members took their lives and they were all found wearing arm patches that read Heaven's Gate Away Team. Moving on to number 9, we have the Church Universal and Triumphant. The Church Universal and Triumphant was founded in 1975. It was run by a woman named Elizabeth Clare Prophet. She made her followers believe that she was a channel for God. Apparently, God told her that the world was going to end. So she moved her church compound near Yellowstone,
National Park for safety reasons. She said that the end of the world would come in 1990 after a nuclear war between the US and Russia. When that didn't happen, a lot of members left the cult. Slowly over time, the cult just dissolved. In our 8th spot, we have William Miller. William Miller was an American Baptist preacher as well as the founder of Adventism. He was known for preaching about the end of the world, which he prophesied would be in 1844. He thought the end would come as a purifying apocalypse so the world would be cleansed of sinners. Miller and his followers, the Millerites, believed that there would be a fire in which saints would be resurrected and they would cleanse the world of this evil. When this didn't happen, he lost his loyal followers. In fact, the day in which the world didn't end is now referred to as the Great Disappointment. In our 7th spot, we have Jim Jones. Jim Jones is known as one of the most famous cult leaders in the world. He was the founder and leader of the People's Temple, which he ran in an isolated area in the Guyanese jungle. He convinced his followers that the government was coming for him and that they were going to start a thermonuclear war. In fact, he believed that on July 15th, 1967, a nuclear attack was going to happen. Alas, it didn't. Anyways, in 1978, he convinced his followers to take their lives. He described this to be a revolutionary act. So on November 18th, his cult leaders drank cyanide-laced punch. Some of them drank it willingly, while others had it forced upon them. In the end, 909 people lost their lives. It was said to be one of the most harrowing tragedies in American history. Coming in at number 6, we have the Branch Davidians. This cult was originally founded in 1929 by a man named Victor T. Houteff, and they were a spin-off of the Seventh-day Adventists. Then in 1955, Ben Rodin organized the Branch Davidians. Later, the cult was controlled by David Koresh. He believed that the end was near. He believed in the several seals from the Bible's book of Revelation. He believed that when the seals were opened, that marked the second coming of Christ and the start of the apocalypse. So David and his cult were preparing for the apocalypse. He claimed that he could speak to God, and that's what God told him to do, to prepare. But things ended badly in 1993 when the FBI and military stormed the cult's base. They had belief that the group was stockpiling illegal weapons, so they conducted a raid. This led to a deadly shootout and ended with their building going up in flames. This resulted in the death of 76 cult members. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Russian Doomsday Cult. The Russian Doomsday Cult was founded by a man named Pyotr Kuznetsov. He believed that the end of the world was going to happen in 2008. So in 2007, he gathered the 30 members of his group and sent them to a shelter in a cave. He instructed them to wait there until the end of the world. Of course, Pyotr didn't accompany them. After 6 months in the cave, 14 members decided to come out. Sadly, 2 passed away in this cave. 9 members decided to stay a bit longer, but then later came out. In fact, the members were instructed to take their own lives if the authorities tried to intervene. Thankfully, when the police did come to the rescue, they didn't do that. As for Pyotr, well, he tried to take his own life when his doomsday prediction didn't come true. He then was sent to a psychiatric facility. In our 4th spot, we have The Family. Otherwise known as the Great White Brotherhood, this was an Australian New Age group led by a woman named Anne Hamilton. She convinced her followers that she was the reincarnation of Jesus. She also said that Buddha and Krishna were other spiritual beings that came down to help humanity. And of course, they all believed that the end was near. The cult lived away together in the countryside outside of Melbourne. The kids were instructed to never talk to outside people. They were all homeschooled. Those that didn't listen were punished through beatings, starvation, or emotional torture. People there were also frequently drugged with hallucinogenics. In the end, the police raided the cult and saved the 28 children that they had brought in. Anne and the other woman helping her were then criminally charged. And a number of cult members actually sued her for psychiatric and psychological illness upon other things. It said that she paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to her victims. Moving on to number 3, we have Box Canyon Cult. Located in Southern California, Box Canyon was the perfect rocky hideaway for a doomsday cult. It all started when a man who went by the name of Krishna Venta claimed that he was the second coming of Christ and was over 240,000 years old. In 1948, he bought 25 acres of land in Box Canyon to build a monastery and several rooms for his followers to stay in. In the monastery, Venta would preach about the impending World War III, which would spark the end of the world. He said that World War III was their chance to take back the world. But they were never able to see their plan through. In 1958, two men whose wives joined the cult decided to bomb it. The blast killed them, Venta, and 7 of the followers. Some of the survivors stayed there, whereas others went to join Jim Jones's cult and later passed away there. In our second spot, we have the Order of the Solar Temple. This cult was formed in 1984 by Joseph DiMambro and Luc Jouret. It started off its teachings based on New Age spiritualism, but they realized that they got more followers when they started to become more doomsday focused. And then these followers brought them more money, so they loved that. So they believed that once the end of the world came, they would be transported to another planet and then live there. Now, the history of what went down in this cult is very complex, so I'm just gonna do a quick rundown. In the 1990s, authorities started to investigate this group. In 1994, a man and his family were killed after speaking out about the cult. Days later, 2 temple buildings in Switzerland burnt to the ground. 48 bodies were found inside. Some were shot, others were injected with tranquilizers and left to perish in the fire. Then in 1995, a building in the Swiss Alps burnt down. 16 bodies were found inside there. Then in 1997, a building in Quebec burnt down. 5 more members died then. In total, 74 cult members passed away. To this day though, this cult still exists. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Shinriko cult. The Shinriko cult was founded in 1984 by a man named Shoko Ashihara. Members of this cult believed that the end of the world was near. The leader predicted that it would occur in 1996 or between 1999 and 2003. But he claimed that the members were going to be the only ones that survived. But in order to become a member, they would have to sign their estates over to the group, which in the end made him incredibly wealthy. In 1995, the cult carried out the deadly Tokyo subway sarin attack, where 13 people died and thousands got injured. Apparently, this was done as an attempt to start the apocalypse, but also to show how strong they were to try and stop the authorities from shutting down their cult. As a result of this attack, 13 members of the group got the death sentence, including the leader. After his death, the name of the cult changed, and to this day, it's still active. It's said that it has about 1,500 active followers.